Another great quote that I read some time back was from Seth Godin. And he said that culture is the way we do things around here. And I think, the best successes that we have in accessibility is when accessibility becomes the way we do things around here, and that's one of the things we're trying to do at GitHub with a large degree of success.
Welcome to episode 5 of Accessibility and Gen AI, a podcast that interviews the newsmakers and thought leaders in the world of accessibility and artificial intelligence. I'm Joe Devon, joined by my co-host, Eamon McErlean, and today I'm excited to interview my good friend, Ed Summers, who's a true advocate and leader in accessibility. GitHub hired him to spearhead their commitment to accessibility. Ed, thank you for joining the pod.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thanks, Eamon. I'm a loyal listener of the pod and just incredibly humbled and excited to be on this side of the mic.
Awesome. Why don't we start with something exciting, because a little birdie told me that you have an announcement that you are going to make right here on the podcast. Would you like to do so now?
That's great. Thanks for the opportunity. GitHub Copilot, our AI coding assistant that's integrated into the GitHub platform, is now free for all GitHub users. And we're also announcing that we just crossed the boundary of 150 million developers on GitHub.
150 million.
150 million developers.
Wow.
And has that number been like a progression, over multiple years, or have you seen spikes in that recently, or how's that progressed to that figure?
It's steadily progressing up. I've been at GitHub now for 2.5 years. Not long after I joined, we announced the 100 million developer mark. So you have to compute that. You have to do the math to compute that growth rate.
Well, either way, congrats. It's a hell of a figure to hit. And speaking about you joining GitHub, you said 2.5 years ago. Would you mind walking us through your journey, like from the beginning, and how you really got involved in the accessibility world?
Well, when I was a kid, I was diagnosed with a degenerative retinal disease. It was very minor for many years. And, along the way, as I went to college and I earned degrees in computer science and math, so I'm kind of a math nerd. And this degenerative retinal disease really kicked into gear, in my 20s. And by about the time I was 30, around early 30s, I was crossing that boundary from, then low vision to really thinking of myself as being blind. So as you can imagine, that's quite the journey in a variety of ways, just psychologically and socially and professionally. But I was really blessed all the way through. And it became pretty clear that with a background as a developer, and by that time starting to lead managed teams, and just that technical experience combined with the lived experience of being low vision and then blind, it became crystal clear that my path going forward was going to be accessibility. And I started, at the time I was managing a development team as an engineering manager. And I started doing kind of they're not related to accessibility. And I started doing some kind of just volunteer work at the company I was at to work on accessibility, nights and weekends. And pretty soon I was recruited to lead that team, to build that program at the company that I was at. And that was in 2010. And I've been building teams and leading accessibility programs ever since.
So it's been that progression over basically 14, 15 years in total. And where you're at now, GitHub, and the scope that GitHub has from a customer perspective, from a global developer perspective, I'm sure as head of accessibility that you cover many aspects, both from a customer engagement and direct employees. But, and I've experienced this myself. You wear multiple hats. How do you prioritize kind of the areas you go after, and what would your greatest challenges be from your perspective?
It's true. many of the people who are quote unquote heads of accessibility do wear many hats, but I think there's a lot of people out there that are effectively heads of accessibility without the title and without the formal support within the organization. And in many respects, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think having a formal title of head of accessibility, reporting at a high level within the org, that's a blessing, because that just implies resources are available in order to incorporate accessibility as just a fundamental operating principle, across the org. So let's see. I think I kind of think about getting support across the org. There's a couple things. There's three things really. There's carrots and sticks are the first two, right? Kind of the B.F. Skinner model. And the carrots are the job well done and more customers and things like that, more revenue because of accessibility, and of course sticks are legal compliance and things like that. But then there's this thing that I learned pretty early on, which I call identity. And identity is when people kind of include accessibility and disability inclusion, including people with disability, in the way they think about the business and they think about their role in the business. Another great quote that I read some time back was from Seth Godin. And he said that culture is the way we do things around here, the way we do things around here. And I think, the best successes that we have in accessibility is when accessibility becomes the way we do things around here, and that's one of the things we're trying to do at GitHub with a large degree of success.
No, love it. As I've mentioned before, I think, you talk about the carrot and the stick. I think the three areas I've always called out is A, first and foremost, and should always be first and foremost, is the right thing to do. 2, conformance, and it is becoming more and more critical from a conformance, especially in the public sector. But 3, and I'm sure you'll agree, if you do accessibility right, it can become a competitive advantage ultimately for you if you do it the right way for the right reasons. But to do it the right way, you have to embed it. It cannot be an afterthought. It cannot be thought of as like an extra thing you have to do. It just has to be part of your DNA. It has to be part and embedded in the product development lifecycle for you to truly succeed.
That's right. And to continue succeeding, right? I think that's where the key thing there, embedding it.
I love how you brought up identity, Ed, because to me, here we are, those of us advocates of accessibility that have been trying hard for many years to get the community of developers and the people that build digital technology to care about accessibility. And I've always felt that accessibility is downstream of dev culture, if that makes sense. And what's really cool about your position and what made me so excited about GitHub creating a head of accessibility was that the dev culture lives on GitHub. So being that you're in such a key role to make a difference, and we've collaborated a fair bit together, so I know what kind of a difference you've made, but can you share how you view that dev culture and its importance, how the craft of development, including accessibility, how important is that, and how much do you think about that as you consider what your goals are for your mandate there?
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right in that the dev culture is just the global dev culture, most of whom are working on GitHub. And I've included in the dev culture designers and product managers, right? Kind of like broader. We collectively are making or breaking accessibility. And if you think about the way I think about this is there's 8 billion people in the world. There's 150 million people working on GitHub. So let's say that's all of them. So there's whatever 2% of the world's population. we're creating the technology that's used by everyone. And that technology is not optional in the sense that, if you want to network online, if you want to network, and period, right? I mean, it's global now. You have to do it on LinkedIn or social channels, blogs and podcasts. And if you can't access those things, then you're shut out. If you want to apply for a job, then that happens online. When it comes to the online digital part of it, during the pandemic, employment for people with disabilities rose during the pandemic because it became possible to work from home, and that just opened so many doors. So I think I think you're right. The quote unquote developers, developer culture, it makes or breaks accessibility. And I think that there's a positive trend. There's just a growing awareness and incorporation of accessibility into dev culture. And I think that if you look at the great designers and the great developers, solving the problem, making the thing work is kind of like, it's really easy. There's a lot of developers that can write the code in such a way for it to work. But when you start doing great work within the constraints of limited memory, or performance constraints or accessibility constraints, that becomes the kind of fertile ground for real innovation. And that's where developers and designers who are really good at their craft, that's where they shine. Embracing those constraints and making great experiences in spite of them.
How do you get them bought in to that, Ed? Like, we talked about the carrot and stick before, but like, how do you incentivize and really showcase the criticality of it?
It's a great question. Well, I think there's data, right? I mean, you kind of look at the way that people, that change happens within the human brain and also within organizations. Data is a big driver of that. And that data is the incidence of people with disabilities or the number of users that have disabilities or the revenue. There's all kinds of great data points that create. But then I also think that those stories about people with disabilities, about users of your products and how they succeed or how they struggle, that really does make a difference. And then I think, one of the things that's been super effective for us at GitHub is just a few key decisions about accessibility that take advantage, that kind of graft accessibility onto existing mechanisms within the company. And I'll give you the best example for GitHub. That's we have this program called the Engineering Fundamentals program, and that is a way that we as an organization just promote engineering excellence in everything we do. So our three engineering fundamentals are availability, accessibility, and security. And we have scorecards that measure that. Now, the fact that this engineering fundamentals program exists, well, it's just an amazing thing, because all of the websites and all the products that we ship, they're kind of broken into services. And a service is, you can think of as an entire product, or it may be a portion of the product, like a certain number of pages on the site. And the purpose of the services is just to be able to assign ownership to a team. So, certain teams might support the login process, whereas others are supporting some other part of the website. So we have this thing called service catalog, and that way we have kind of an owner, and we can attach these scorecards to services, whether it be security or availability or accessibility, and it's just a wonderful framework within which to make just to make it visible and make transparent where we currently stand when it comes to those fundamentals, and also drive excellence over time.
And have definitive ownership for the respective areas as well.
Exactly.
you and I were seated next to each other when your CEO, Tom Domke, and I hope I got his name correct, announced that the new mission of GitHub is now all around AI and making coding more accessible to everyone. There is a goal to hit 1 billion users, which is huge. And your GitHub Copilot is clearly the mechanism to get there. It's just incredible that it is now free. And I would love to understand what you think about that vision, how GitHub Copilot relates to it, as well as how to do accessibility with GitHub Copilot.
Yeah, well, the 1 billion developer goal is a bold goal. And I remember when I first read about it, it was one of those times where I locked my computer and stood up and went for a walk around the block just to process, the enormity of it. Considering there's 8 billion people in the world, so making 1 billion of them developers, that's a big challenge. But as we've worked on this and started to map out plans towards bringing this into reality, what we're really saying is that there's 1 billion people who have access to the tools of innovation. And the way that's going to happen is via natural language. So when I learned to code on using Fortran 77 many years ago. And the languages and tools that we use as professional developers are pretty nerdy. And there's a lot of people, their brain doesn't work like that. But when people can express an idea in natural language and have AI turn that idea into a prototype, then they can start to innovate and to validate their ideas and assumptions, and then bring in, quote unquote, professional developers to take that and run with it and turn it into a hardened product. So I think, this goal, what we're really saying is we're going to unleash just the next level of human creativity.
Completely agree. And I think it puts a whole new spin in the whole, low code, no code, because literally you can have that, true generic information of what you want. Just as long as you can articulate what you want to build, you can end up, being a semi-developer, if you will. Apart from that specific area, the Copilot, either personally or professionally, what else in the Gen AI world upcoming that excites you?
Well, let's see. Let's talk about how it's kind of like my go-to AI. As a person who's blind. If we didn't say that, meant to say earlier that I am blind. And my go-to use case for AI in the physical world is currently using my Meta AI glasses, which are paired with my iPhone. And I use that just straight up using the Meta AI feature. And I also use it with this app called Be My Eyes. Be My Eyes is an app that originally was allowed you to connect, a blind person to connect with a volunteer, where they could share their camera and their audio with a volunteer and get sighted assistance. For reference, your first version of your podcast, your first episode was with Mike Buckley, the CEO of Be My Eyes, and he is just an amazing leader in this space, doing great work there. But then in the last year or so, Be My Eyes added this feature called Be My AI. So it's just my workflow right now when I need to answer a problem that, solve a problem or solve an access problem in the physical world, is I first go to AI and I ask either Meta AI straight up or Be My AI. I ask, I start interacting with it to solve my problem. And if I can't do it that way, then I'll call a volunteer, and then I get a human on the line. And there's a surprising number of problems that I can solve very nicely, hands-free access using the camera on my Meta AI, my Ray-Ban glasses. So, that's just opened up just a lot of more, kind of efficiency and independence for me in ways big and small. I think, one of the things I would love to see moving forward with this is we need GPS to be a part of that. Like I want that model to know where I am, right? And that's one thing. And then we also need to create this kind of a goal-directed mode. So, for example, let's say that I get out of the Uber at the airport and I need to go to gate D16. I would love to be able to bring up my AI through my AI agent, through my glasses and say, okay, I need to get from where I am right now, GPS camera feed being detected. I need to get to gate D16. Let's go, and I have a big German Shepherd guide dog. We move fast and we can go where we need help. We need to help reading the signs as we go by them, be able to scan the space and figure out, oh, there's the escalator, there's the elevator, those kinds of things. And I think that's one place where this is going to go moving forward. And you're starting to see there's a little bit of that. There's a couple of projects that went out recently. One is the live AI feature from Meta. It was demoed at Connect a few months ago. Pretty cool. If you haven't seen that, check it out. And then Google has a project named Project Astra, which is kind of the same thing. It's a continuous conversation with AI using both an audio and video feed. Pretty cool.
I did see somebody show the Gemini 2.0, and I think it was the Astra, where it was looking while they were they were doing social media, and he did say to the AI, please encourage me to be more productive. So it said, hey, get off social media and get to work, which was pretty cool. Ed, in our conversations, I've personally been very excited by David Eagleman did this amazing TED Talk where he showed that he gave a haptic vest to someone who is deaf, let him train for like an hour a day. And then at the end of it, essentially he was taking the sound from the iPhone, turning it into haptic touches, and this person was able to hear through the haptic touches. And I got really excited by haptics in general. But what I love about hanging out with you is everybody has a different perspective. And I remember you didn't feel that haptics is working as well. So I always love to hear different people with different perspectives. What do you think from the upcoming, you've got some people wearing pins, some people wearing glasses, some people wearing, the earphone, the earbuds. There are different form factors. What's your take on haptics and versus the other potential form factors in terms of what's going to really change things for people generally and for the accessibility movement? Yeah,
it's a fascinating space. I think there's a ton of potential with haptics. It may work for some people, not work for others, right? I think the other thing about haptics is not only with haptics, but I have a lot of background in this field called Sonification. I worked on the accessibility of data visualization for many years before or while I was working at my previous company. And Sonification is using sound to represent data. And there's once you get past kind of the surface level interactions with haptics or sound, then there becomes learning curves. Right. And these learning curves is where you kind of you literally have to learn how to interpret new things, and wire in, kind of, build those pathways in your brain. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I think the challenge is climbing those learning curves, because once you get past the immediately obvious kinds of things, it becomes non-intuitive and things don't necessarily make sense right out of the box. So, for example, you have to interpret the signal from the haptic device in order to be able to understand how that stock chart is moving, up and down, just as an example of that. But I think, one thing this points out is, a couple of things. One, the advances we're going to see in using AI is kind of in lockstep with these other fields such as HCI, right? Because AI is not a product. AI is a foundational technology that can be used in products, to solve problems. You still have to have a user interface, and user interfaces still have, what do you want to call it? Kind of restrictions. For example, right now we get a lot of feedback from AI using text or speech, and and so if I want to, I don't know, locate where I dropped my keys, or my keys are on the floor somewhere on the counter, like, hey, where are they? Well, you kind of have to describe that, right, in text. But the beautiful thing about vision, which I don't have, is the ability just to see exactly where it is. So I think we have to find additional mechanisms like Haptics. There's additional innovations that are going to block some of the AI, some of the progress that we make on AI. So, the folks who are out there who are working in the HCI space, I think they're doing the good work and opening up additional adoption of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the word you were looking for was constraint.
Yes. Thank you.
And would you mind just explaining in a little more detail the sonification, what that looks like? It's such a cool technology, and maybe explain how you would do that with a stock chart. And is that something that you did at SAS?
Right. Yeah. So before I came to GitHub, I was the director of accessibility at this company called SAS, all caps SAS. It's a leading firm in data and analytics. And when I was there pretty early on, when I started working on accessibility, it became obvious that if we were to make our products fully accessible and quote unquote conformant with something like the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the people, the way that people used our products was they were using it to analyze data, to find insights in the data. And again, the WCAG was not enough. It required a way to, experience, to understand the data faster than a description. And way back then, there was no way to generate a description programmatically like we have now with Gen AI, right? So we leveraged some existing research. There's been research in the field of sonification for since the 90s. And the way it works is basically, if you think of a stock chart, the y-axis represents the price, and we would map that to the pitch of a tone, like a musical note, from a low C to a high C, let's say, on the piano scale. And then we would map the left-hand side of the chart in the left speaker all the way over to the right-hand side of the chart in the right speaker, taking advantage of the simple panning effect, right, that's been available in audio APIs for a long time. And those two dimensions of panning and pitch, those are just the bread and butter of sonification, and that allows you to kind of wire in or to convey a lot of information in that XY plane. And then if you add interactivity to that, right? So rather than just kind of like having the whole thing play, if you make it so that you can literally use a keyboard to explore each data point, for example, then it becomes a lot more active and just it greatly increases the ability to perceive and understand data visualizations.
And that's why accessibility is so cool. It's so innovative, and people are just missing out because it's the constraint that makes things fun and innovative. So thank you for sharing that.
And you touched upon WCAG and conformance levels, but to do it properly, we do need to go above and beyond. I always say we want to be conformant, but we always want optimal usability. One of the features we're doing at Service now is complete conversational AI voice integration. So we can have ultimately an end user enter Now Assist with conversational AI, and then enter their actual platform to process a customer case, to resolve an issue completely via conversational AI. So, and again, as we all know, the best accessibility features can be utilized by everyone and are utilized by many people, which is really where we want to get to. When we look at new features like that customer engagement and actually listening to our customers is a key part of that. Can you share with us from a GitHub perspective what that engagement looks like for you and your accessibility team members with your customers? Do you have ongoing meetings with them? Do you have different forums with them? How do you solicit that feedback?
You bet. Yeah. So over the last couple of years, these are capabilities we've been building, just foundational capabilities that are required in any accessibility program. in order to do it well and to solve the usability problem, as you mentioned. So there's a couple different mechanisms. So our mainline support channels, there's primarily two. We have a support channel for enterprise customers, as most companies do, where questions get reported through support.github.com. And then we have open on the web. We call them community pages. And each product area on our community site has a discussion. It's called a GitHub discussion, where people can post questions and get answers. So we do have a category on the community site specifically for accessibility, where we can post announcements, and users with disabilities can report problems or ask questions. So over the last couple of quarters, we've just built out our ability to triage and track and get answers back to people on those forums, on the accessibility forum specifically. And I'm just proud to say we got our response time down to 2 days. That doesn't mean we're fixing issues in 2 days. It means we're giving you a response, and we're starting that dialogue in 2 days. And that's a big achievement for us. And then a couple other ways where we're doing this is we have a user research program that focuses specifically on inclusion. So every month we're running usability studies, and we're pulling from that. We're inviting people to participate in those studies through what we call our inclusive research panel, which I think we're up to about 150 people with disabilities now. On the communities page, there's a discussion at the top where you can go register. You can request to become a part of that panel. And then we've just recently created this is a pilot project where we've created a Slack channel for developers with disabilities, where we have a lot more kind of interactive discussion. And that's under a pilot right now, with just a few people admitted at this point as we start to build that out, but we have to grow that in the future. And we can get a link to the communities page in the show notes.
That's awesome. They got feedback, and even from your employees, that timely feedback at certain phases of the development lifecycle is invaluable. It really is. That engagement's key.
Yeah. Eamon, let me ask you, you said something there that really piqued my curiosity. So you were talking about conversational AI at ServiceNow. And I just kind of, would love to hear both of your opinion on how that conversational AI kind of front end, how that's going to affect user interface development, as a whole moving forward. Are we seeing the death of UI because of conversational AI?
Joe, go ahead. I'll let you go first.
I just had in my mind this one conversation, and you gave me the perfect lead into it. You have the most amazing employee. I just love watching all of her work. Her name is Amelia Wattenberger, and she builds these incredible UIs. And she has one now called Fisheye, which is a different way of looking at data, and it seems to be integrated into LLMs, if I get it correctly. She teased some product that's coming out that I haven't been able to see. But no, I think there's lots of room for different kinds of UIs, and it's really important to see what's going to be coming. And definitely follow Amelia. She's incredible. Anybody watching this, just Google her or ChatGPT her and find out where she does socials.
Yeah, from our perspective, we do a combination of a few things. We do like a heuristic evaluations as well to see how intuitive. For example, voice assist, how easy it is to turn on, how easy it is for an end user to actually access it and know it's there. And thereafter, we go back to customer engagement, walking through step by step. The biggest thing for us from a UI and even from an overall functionality perspective is simplicity. It really is. How can you simplify the entire process? We try to do that. We have a new data fabric initiative going on to make sure that data from different sources can be condensed and be as fluid as possible from an end user perspective without having to go to multiple different streams or areas. But the simpler, the better. And it's the same thing. I don't care if you're talking about a conversational UI or any other UI. That's kind of our mindset overall. And you touched upon a key piece of that earlier, is ensuring you engage with individuals with disability. ensuring you engage with them early in that phase, at the design phase, even at the requirements phase, to solicit their feedback, or else you're not going to deliver an optimal solution unless you engage.
And let me add one other feature that Amelia created for GitHub Next, I think it's called. It's sort of like a GitHub Lab feature. She created this accessibility brush where you have code and then you just wave your wand, put a brush over it, and it makes the code more accessible. Really cool feature. And we've got only a couple of minutes left, so we're heading toward the final comments here, Ed. And if you could share where you think it's all going, where AI and accessibility is going, and maybe a little nod to the incredible blog that you have with some great experiences of people who have been impacted by the work that you and the good folks at GitHub are doing.
Yeah, that goes back to the stories. We created a video series it's called Coding Accessibility. And thus far, we've highlighted 5 developers with disabilities who are working on GitHub, some in open source, and just doing amazing work. Some of the folks that are highlighted there include the folks who created the free NVDA screen reader, and which was created by blind people for blind people. Each one of those videos, they're about 10 minutes, and they're definitely worth a watch. You can check them out on our YouTube channel. We can get this in the show notes as well, maybe at youtube.com/GitHub. Let's see, where is it going? Are we talking about where is it going from an AI perspective?
Whatever you would like to most share, but my question is more around AI and accessibility.
Agreed. Okay, cool. Yeah, first off, it's going so fast. The innovation cycle with AI right now, I think it's the fastest innovation cycle I've ever seen. I've been around this business for a little while, and I can remember when innovation cycles were years long, but we're just looking at like weeks now with different innovations. And I think I'm probably not the first person to say this, but I think we're entering that phase where the foundational technology of Gen AI is increasing in performance and reducing in cost, getting a reduction in cost to the point where now we're going to go into this period where the hammer that is Gen AI people are going to use it to start pounding on a lot of nails to see how well Gen AI can crack open different problems. So I think, clearly that's happened in genomics and genetics. It's happened in the biological sciences. It's happened in the material sciences. And I think, as a result of this just kind of flourishing of using this new tool to solve different problems, the impact on humanity is going to be huge, and huge in a positive way. And this may be a little bit controversial, maybe a little bit spicy, because, disability isn't something that needs to be solved, necessarily. On the other hand, one cause of disability is disease. And I think there's a lot of innovation that's going to happen that's going to reduce the incidence of disability due to better preventions, treatments, cures of disease. So, I know and I want to just qualify that by saying there are people in the disability community who do not feel that they need to be quote unquote fixed. I don't feel like that. Certainly there are people in the neurodiverse community that I think would agree, and people in the deaf community tend to agree as well. It's part of who we are. It is, blindness has become part of who I am. But I think the innovations in medicine are going to change humanity, I think, in one way. And then I think in addition to that, the thing that I'm really keeping an eye on is robotics and the way that AI is being incorporated in ways that can change the physical world. One of the things I saw recently that I think is really fascinating is there's a startup called Physical Intelligence. Check them out. They're basically using Gen AI to train a general purpose model for the physical world for controlling robots. And they're solving problems like the simple one is just the ability to solve to fold laundry.
Oh yeah, I've seen their videos. Yeah,
isn't that? Yeah. that model was trained using Gen AI. And Gen AI, what it's really good at is language prediction, right? To look at the data, find the patterns in the data, predict the next token in the data. And the data streams they're using are these sensors from these manual robotic arms that people are controlling with remote control device, with a remote control. Yeah, and that along with the video feed that is being used to train models to do these very intricate things. And I think, that's going to flourish. And in the next 5 to 10 years, those kinds of the control that we have as people with disabilities of the physical world is going to change drastically.
Thank you so much, Ed. This has really been a pleasure catching up with you on the pod after all these years.
We finally did it.
Ed, you don't mind if we wrap up on a more of a personal note? So I see two things behind you. Einstein, picture of Einstein to the right, and then I think there's 3 vinyl records or albums on your left shoulder. Are you a music guy and through, or can you give us a little bit of background on them?
I do love music. I originally went to college to be a music major. Pretty common in our field. Turns out that I'm a hell of a lot better at computer science than I am at music. And it's a good thing too. I think I would have been a starving musician. Who knows? But yeah, that's Stevie Ray Vaughan, my favorite guitarist of all time. And of course, I don't know if you know, but Einstein had a disability. He was dyslexic.
Dyslexic, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think could have been the dyslexia that gave him the ability to see, to think differently, basically. Mm-hmm. I think. And then, of course, there's my GitHub Monocat there in the background right there.
Listen, honestly, just reiterate what Joe said. Thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute delight talking to you and learning from you. Thank you for your continued efforts and looking forward to a continued relationship with you. I really do.
Yeah. Thank you both. Thanks for doing the pod. I'm a loyal listener, so I can't wait to see the next episode coming out in my feed.